So we're making our way through the top 5 things that financial aid letters don't tell you. So far, we've discussed that the financial aid award isn't necessarily all a gift, and we tried to differentiate between the free money and the money that you would have to pay back. Then we took a look at how you could accept or deny awards or loans listed in your financial aid letter. Finally, we left off talking about how the amount of money that you receive in financial aid could decrease after your freshman year. The fourth thing I want to cover that financial aid letters don't necessarily tell you is that the net price is more important than the overall cost of attendance. So the net price is when you take the cost of attendance and you subtract any financial aid you would receive. Now you're probably sitting there going, well, Goose, that's a super awesome equation, but I have no idea what the cost of attendance is or this thing about the net price and why that's important. So here's the deal. Some people think that a certain school is cheaper than another school based solely off of their tuition amount, and that's not always true. So we need to look at the overall cost of attendance when we're comparing our schools and the prices. So these are the factors that go into your cost of attendance. The first one is the one that people always think of, and that's tuition. So tuition is the price that you pay to take your classes and your credits. The next most expensive thing that's typically paid when you're going off to school is room and board. So if you're living on campus, this is what you would pay to live on campus. If you're living off campus, you still need to figure in room and board. How much is it going to cost for you to rent a house or an apartment? Maybe you're living with your parents, and so room and board is free. But we still need to consider that when we talk about cost of attendance. Third up is your meal plan. Your meal plan can be very, very expensive. And as a word of advice, please, please, please check what you're paying for your meal plan, because this is something that schools typically sign you up for your freshman year. And they'll sign you up for the most expensive meal plan without you necessarily realizing it sometimes. So I remember in my freshman year, they signed me up for 3 meals a day, and I cannot tell you the amount of times that I maybe only ate 1 meal a day. So I was paying all of this money for a service that I didn't actually use. And some schools will have you pay by the actual items that you pick out, but a lot of schools have you pay just based on how many meals a day that you can eat. Some schools also have what are called flex dollars. So they give you like a charge amount. Let's say they give you $500 and you can spend that at any restaurant or cafeteria on campus. But if you don't use that money, then it's gone. So my brother used to do this, and it was really stupid because he would never eat on campus. And then he'd come to the end of the semester and he'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to waste my $500. And he'd go and he'd buy like pallets of Gatorade and M&Ms and like candy bars. And they'd come home and they'd sit in our house all summer. And I'm like, you didn't want to waste your money, yet you just bought this random crap. So make sure that you take a look at your meal plan and figure out what are you actually going to be eating and what do you actually want to spend money on, because those can get very expensive. Another super expensive thing that figures into the cost of attendance are your books. I'm going to tell you right now, books are probably running around $100 to $200 per one textbook, especially if you're going to be taking math or science. Those books can get super pricey. So here's some awesome tips on how to reduce the cost of books. First, if you can rent books, that's great. So some states and some schools will let you rent books, and then if you turn it back in and it's not too damaged, you get that book fee back. Otherwise, try buying used. I always searched on Amazon or eBay, and I would buy my books used for a significantly reduced price. Another hack that I have is to search for the international version, because those are books that have just a different cover, but they have the same exact content, and it's like less than half the price. Check online to see if the book is online, because some of the books are just online for free. And then I would also recommend not buying your books until you've actually gone to class the very first day. Most professors are required to put a book or a text on their syllabus, but some of them never even use it. So I remember my roommate my freshman year had the bookstore like fulfill her order, and she had spent over $700 for one semester's worth of books her freshman year, and she ended up then going to all her classes, and she didn't need any of them. And she's like, well, I just wasted $700. I'm like, yeah. The other thing that you can do is check and see if you have an inter-school like marketplace or Craigslist type of thing. Sometimes you can buy a used book from an upperclassman or somebody who's already taken the class, and that's great. I actually preferred buying all of my books used because I would have other people's notes and highlighting already done in the book, and I was like, cool, this is kind of like a little cheat sheet for me, kind of like a Spark Notes. And then I would always recommend selling your books back if you can after you're done with them in the semester. So those are just some tips and tricks and hacks for reducing the price of your books. Another cost of attendance would be travel. So this would be the gas that you would need to drive to and from your school, and if you have to pay for parking, and if you're going to decide to do any study abroad. So some schools parking is completely free. Other schools you have to pay a pretty hefty chunk to be able to park on campus. So just know that that can be expensive. And then finally, sometimes you'll have activities or class fees. These are usually associated with classes that require extra materials. So my science lab classes, a lot of my art classes that I had to take. One time for my Phi-Ed class, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to sign up for horseback riding. This sounds awesome. Like, I grew up with horses, sweet. And then it was a $450 additional course fee because you had to pay for the stable care for your class. So just know that some of your classes require extra fees on top of tuition, or if you decide to do other activities within your school, that can all contribute to the cost of attendance. So when you're figuring out your net price, you're going to take all of those items, add them all together, and then you're going to subtract the financial aid you would receive. That number is your net price, and that's what you should compare when you're trying to compare the cost of one school to another. So some schools have a super high tuition, but they also offer super high financial aid. Some schools have low tuition, but their room and board and meal plans are ridiculously high. And so we just want to make sure that we're comparing the same number, not just one of these items. So let's take a look at what this would actually be like and how you could figure this based on a financial aid letter. So in this example for Chapman University, when we're finding the net price, remember we want the cost of attendance minus financial aid. So if I'm looking at this, my cost of attendance is all of these amounts on the bottom. So it says estimated tuition and fees, and then it says estimated room and board. Anytime they give you a range like that, assume it's the higher range. We'd rather overplan than underplan. And then notice how they say, hey, this is estimates only, this can change. And I like how at the bottom, they also talk about other costs, including the books, the transportation, and the living expenses. So if I was trying to find the cost of attendance, I would add all those together. So I take $43,573 plus $13,500, and that would be $57,073. Then I would look at my financial aid. So in this case, let's say I took everything, the scholarships, the grants, and all of the loans. That total was $42,150. If I wanted to attend Chapman University, it's actually only going to cost me $14,923. Now again, that's if I take all aid. And remember, some of that aid I have to pay back. The loans I have to pay back, and then I technically have to pay back or work for the work study. So I always like to figure my net price if I take all aid and if I take only the free aid. So let's say I only took the scholarships and the grants. My net price would be $27,423. So that's the number that I would want to compare from school to school.